So greetings, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of Carpinteria Birdwatchers for Thursday, February 17th. We are going to talk about gulls, but I'm going to try to talk about gulls quickly, which is dangerous and difficult because gulls are complicated. So it's a refresher. We're just kind of covering gulls, you know, at a 40,000 foot level. It should be fun. We have talked about gulls before, and I will mention that if you want a more in-depth discussion of gulls, that you can find a link to our previous meetings in the YouTube archive in either the description for this YouTube video, if you're watching this on YouTube, or on the blog post at carpbirdwatchers.org for this meeting, if you're looking for it there. And either way, you can watch those previous Zoom meetings that we had. It's a two-parter, so we've got about an hour talking about gulls, and then we've got another hour talking about gulls in those meetings. So this is going to be faster than that, and we're just going to hit the high points. There's also a bunch of links to other videos. It turns out if you start looking for videos on gull identification, all the bird clubs in North America have been doing Zoom meetings for the last few years, and there's lots of meetings on gulls out there. So I picked some of my favorites, and there's links to those as well. So you can, you know, if this is not enough gull content for you, you've got hours of gull content. I don't have a special guest. You are all my special guests for this meeting. So even more than usual, I encourage you to jump in and ask questions or interrupt if something doesn't make sense, or if I get tongue-tied and say something completely wrong, which could definitely happen. Today is, I think, the first time I've tried to go bird watching all day. I took the day off work and went bird watching all day, and then do a meeting at night. And, you know, I am famously prone to getting just addle-brained after too much bird watching. So there's no guarantee this will make sense at all, but I'll do my best. Anyway, so hi, everybody. The quick announcements before we talk about gulls are that this Saturday, we are having an outing. And it will be on, well, it doesn't have to just be gulls, but it will be at least somewhat on gulls. We're going to go down to Carpinteria State Beach at the end of Linden Avenue. We will meet there Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, and hopefully there will be some gulls around, and we can put our gull knowledge to the test. And let's see. I also wanted to mention this weekend is the Great Backyard Bird Count. So eBird and Audubon and Birds Canada do this thing every year, where they encourage people to go out and look at birds for the 4 days spanning this weekend. So starting tomorrow through Monday, if you go look at birds, put in a list, report your sightings with eBird or with the Merlin app, and you can be part of it. So I encourage everyone to do that. I mean, I encourage you to go look at birds all the time anyway, but it's especially fun to do it when everybody else is doing it. Let's see. And I guess one other thing I did want to announce, I don't have a lot of details on this yet, but I've previously talked about the Living Shoreline Festival, something I've been involved with working on. That was postponed due to COVID, but we are going forward with one little piece of it this spring. So on April 23rd, which is a Saturday, this coming April 23rd, we're going to have the first annual Carpinteria Little Big Day. So it's going to be a collective birding experience in and around Carpinteria, kind of like the Christmas count, but different. It's a smaller circle. It's a 7-mile diameter instead of the 15-mile diameter circle of the Carp Christmas count. And it is explicitly competitive in a friendly way, hopefully. But it's teams of 3 to 5 people, and you all get to go out there. You don't have an assigned territory. It's up to each team to decide where they wish to bird. And it's just for 4 hours. So it's from 8 a.m. till noon. And I think it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. And look on the carpbirdwatchers.org website for information about it. We don't have any information about it there yet, but hopefully in the next week or so, we'll put an announcement up there, and there'll be a thing you can sign up, a form to sign up, and think about making a team if you are so inclined. It doesn't have to be, I say friendly, competitive, but it doesn't have to be a competition. It can also just be, going out and birding on that day, and we see how many species we get collectively. I mean, that'll be going on too. So I'm really curious to see how it comes out.
Which day is it again? Sorry.
No, that's fine, Brody. It is April 23rd, which is Saturday around Earth Day.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. So that's it for my announcements. Anyone have anything super exciting from their recent birding that they want to share before we jump into gulls? Everyone's just very excited to talk about gulls, I can tell.
I guess we could just talk about very quickly the Eurasian widgeon.
Oh, yeah.
That the Carpinteria Salt Marsh Reserve. If you go down, what's that street, the main street, John?
You're talking about the private road that comes off Carp Avenue to get to the beach?
No, the other one. Everybody's been seeing it at the fence.
Estero Way?
Estero Way. If you go to Estero Way, I think Andrew may have seen it. If you go to Estero Way and stand at the fence right on the other side of the tracks, people have been seeing it there if they want to try to see it.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I did actually. I went in, was it Tuesday or Wednesday? I think it was Wednesday morning I went in, and or Tuesday. I can't remember. It was too long ago. It's in the before time. Anyway, I went and I saw the bird, so that was exciting. I was excited to see that Eurasian widgeon hanging out there with the American widgeons. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead then and jump into gulls. And to do that, I'm going to share my screen. Let's see how this works. Oh, and I did not prepare properly. There's one other thing I have to do first. So this is me narrating my lack of preparation. There we go. We'll do this and this and this. All right, so if I did this correctly, you should be seeing my screen with a gull on it. Are we seeing the gull? Thumbs up? Excellent. Okay, so as I said, this is a refresher on gulls. And oh, Linda asked, my wife Linda is in the meeting, which is, she does not always participate in the meeting, but she wanted to include this comic, so I thought this was fun. This is a Will McPhail comic, and it kind of highlights the way that gulls and humans have a special relationship. They're not like most birds that are sort of shy and avoid us at all costs. Gulls and humans, they get up close and interact. And if you leave your bag of chips out at the beach while you walk away from your towel, you will find out just how much gulls were willing to interact with you. So I want to talk about identification strategies. So gulls are famously kind of hard to identify, or can be hard to identify. And it really helps, I think, to have a strategic approach. You want to do the things that work well, and you want to avoid the things that don't work well. So let's talk about, well, let me just briefly mention what I think does not work well. What doesn't get you there in terms of gull identification is you have the bird in front of you and you have the field guide open or your field guide app, and you're trying to match the bird to the picture in the field guide, which is sort of the most obvious direct way to identify a bird, but it gets you into trouble with gulls because there's so much variety. They go through so many plumage variations, and there's individual variation. It's just very, very tough. And if you've got a huge flock of gulls, that's a lot of picture matching to try to do. So I'm going to recommend that you still need to look at the birds and eventually get to where you're kind of matching it with what you expect to see. But there's some other things that I recommend you do to kind of get yourself to that place. So one thing I recommend is patience. And I won't quote Sibley because I've quoted him every time I've talked about gulls, but he recommends that you take a patient approach to gulls. Don't be hasty. You'll get into trouble if you try and do it fast. Another thing is to take advantage of the opportunity for comparison. So gulls form these mixed flocks, and they hang out with adults and immatures and different species all hanging out together. And this is actually super useful because it gives you like a decoder ring. You can identify the easy ones first, and then compare them to the others. So you see relative size. The shade of gray on the bird's back is very important. And depending on lighting, that can be hard to judge, but you have them all laid out in front of you. You can easily see those relative darkness of the mantle, the back of the bird. So comparison is really helpful if you have your gulls next to each other, as you often do. And I want to advise you, like I always do, to again, don't just look at plumage, but look at structure. You really want to look at the overall size and shape of the bird. Is it, chunky? Is it elongated? Different gull species have characteristic shapes, and they get those shapes pretty early on. So all the gulls you see, even the immature ones, are going to be the same size and shape as the adults. So again, if you start with identifying the adults, then you can kind of use them as a yardstick to look for the ones that are shaped the same way, and it's very helpful. And also in that structure, I would include the size and shape of the beak, which is really important, and the length of the primaries, the length of the wingtips on the folded wing. Birds that migrate long distances, gulls that migrate longer, tend to have longer wings. So you can see those differences if you focus in on it. I threw this picture up here because this is a photo I took last December down at Carpinteria State Beach. And we've got a western gull in the background, a juvenile western gull on the left, a couple of California gulls in the foreground, and then this gull over here on the right, which really had me stumped. And at first glance, if you're just kind of trying to match pictures in the book, it looks kind of like the juvenile western gull, right? It's big and it's brown and it's got pink legs, kind of got some westerny features. But if you're doing that comparison and you're looking at structure, it's just wrong. It just doesn't look right. So we'll come back to that bird later. But I am suggesting that you pay attention to structure. It's very helpful sometimes. And finally, I really am a big fan with gulls of looking at the bare parts. Look at the eyes, look at the beak, look at the legs and feet. The color of those bare parts, unobscured by that line plumage with all its weird variations that can be so confusing. The bare parts really tell an important part of that story. And since you're being patient and you're taking the time to look at all these different things, make sure not to overlook those because they're really, really helpful. Okay, so again, I don't want to just blab myself constantly, and I don't have a guest here to bounce questions off of. Do you have questions? Do you have comments? Feel free to jump in. I'm opening the floor to discussion of the things we've talked about. You're all very shy. Suzanne, you have unmuted.
Yeah, I was wondering on your previous picture where you had those two juveniles, large gulls, the right one. I'm here in Goleta Beach frequently trying to find that glaucous-winged gull. Because everybody who reports on gulls there sees one glaucous-winged gull, and I never found it, and although I've been there a lot. So I wonder whether that is one.
So I was unsure about this bird, and that is one of the first things I thought of was, is it maybe a glaucous-winged? But I think the primaries are too dark. In a glaucous-winged immature, the whole wing should be pretty close to the same color.
Mm-hmm.
What I think this actually is a first-year herring gull, which is a bird that I don't see a lot of. So I was uncertain, but I just recently went back and looked at this checklist, and I left it as gull species originally. And I thought, I think that's a herring gull. So I went ahead and changed it to herring gull. So hopefully I'm right. But again, with gulls, it's sometimes a gray area. It's not always definitive, but that's what I think that is.
Yeah, the gray area. There are also mixed breed ones, right? The glaucous-winged with western gulls. Hybrid?
Yeah. And I am not going to talk about hybrid gulls in this talk. Part of my strategy for this talk is, again, to try and make it quick and not get down into the details, is to not talk about the mixing that happens with like western glaucous-winged hybrid gulls. In our previous gull talk in part 2, there was a discussion of that, and certainly people are welcome to go check that out.
Yeah, I can go back. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so I want to now talk about the big four. And if you were here for our earlier gull talks, these are the 4 gull species that are the most common locally here in Carpinteria. We have all 4 of these here right now. There's a decent chance we'll see all 4 of these species this coming Saturday when we go on our outing. There's also a decent chance we won't see anything else. The large majority of the gulls we see locally are these 4 species. I'm going to start with the adults, which is what these are. These are their adult sort of winter appearance. So in the larger gulls, it takes them about 4 years to get to look like this. In the smaller gulls, it takes 2 to 3 years. But then gulls live a long time. So you tend to see a lot of adult gulls on the beach. Usually the adults are the most common, and then the first years are the next most common. And then anyway, then there's some attrition. So there's fewer second years and even fewer third years. But by the time they get to their adult plumage, they're around for a long time, and that bumps their numbers up. But anyway, this is a good chance to compare these 4 gulls. These are all photos taken at different times, and I tried to size them mostly correctly relative to each other. I tried to they're in different lighting. I tried to get them mostly similar in terms of the effects of lighting on them. And let's put labels on them. So here in the upper left, this is a Western gull, our large gull, relatively dark mantle. And this part of the mantle is technically just this little part of the back, but when we refer to the mantle color of the gull, we're really talking about the mantle and the wing coverts, the upper wing coverts. So relatively dark gray on the adult Western gull. Big heavy beak, we'll talk about that more in a minute. Pink legs, we'll talk about them more. Sort of a compact shape, like the wings aren't terribly long for the size of the gull, so that they're a little bit scrunched. Kind of compact. If you draw an oval around the gull, it's a somewhat fat oval. Then we have the California gull. So just a little bit smaller than the Western gull, but more elongated. So it has longer wings, and it gives it this sort of tapered look. A little bit lighter gray on the mantle. We'll talk about the head and the feet on another slide in a minute. Down here in the lower left, this is the ring-billed gull. This is the photo that I feel is a little bit misleading. I think if this ring-billed were standing next to this California, you could see that its mantle was lighter. The ring-billed gull has a slightly lighter mantle. I think the lighting of these photos doesn't really show that very well. But it has this characteristic bill. In the adult, it has this very light iris. So the white eye or the light eye is definitely a good thing to look for. If you're looking at an adult gull and you're not sure if it's a California or a ring-billed, if it has a dark eye in the adult, probably a California. It has a light eye, probably a ring-billed. And then there's other things you can look at to confirm. And then finally, the Heerman's gull, which is refreshingly easy to pick out in the lineup. They have this really attractive, I think, sort of dark gray underparts where the other gulls in the adult are all white, relatively dark mantle, really distinctive reddish beak with a black tip, and black legs, which none of our other local gulls are going to have. So there you go. What could be easier? If they were all just adults and they all stood next to each other, life would be easy. But life is not that easy. So let's talk about some of the more specific things you can look for. So these are the same 4 photos, but zoomed in to talk about the head, because really when I'm looking at gulls, this is one of the first places I really want to focus. The beak size and shape is super important. And as I say, with the Western gull, it's relatively heavy, by which I mean it's fairly thick top to bottom, has this pretty prominent swelling on the gonus, it's called, this little point that sticks out on the lower beak. And the whole effect is like it's kind of has a swollen tip, like in some Western gulls, it's even more obvious than in this one. In the adults, you'll maybe see a little reddish gonidial spot. This one's a little bit unusual looking, but a little single reddish spot there. An olive eye There's some individual variation, but in this gull, it's a relatively light olive eye. Some are a little darker than this. And a pretty clean white head, even in the winter time, when some of these other gulls have more of a dark flecking going on their heads. That's your sort of classic Western gull look. The California gull, the beak is not as thick and heavy, not as big top to bottom, a little bit less of a swelling at the gonus, but kind of long and parallel sided, the beak is. And it has this characteristic pattern with a black ring with a red spot mostly behind it. And that again is just a dead giveaway for an adult California gull. I mean, there's other things, you should look at other things to confirm that, but if you see that beak pattern, you should be thinking California gull. Dark eye, it has this smudging in the winter plumage of the adult on the back of the head, and especially down low on the nape. One of the videos I linked to of other people doing their gull talks, Alvaro Jaramillo, I think is his name, a renowned bird expert, referred to this as a mullet. He says the California gull has the effect of a mullet haircut, this sort of dark, heavy smudging on the back and the lower part of the head. The ring-billed gull, no red at all on the beak. So it has this prominent dark band, but there shouldn't be any red on the beak at all. So that's a good indication that you're looking at a ring-billed gull if you see this pattern, an adult ring-billed gull, and that very light eye. It has flecking in the winter plumage on the head, but it's finer flecking. You know, the comment I've made in the past about this is that the California gull's flecking looks like it was kind of done with a crayon, and the ring-billed gull looks like it was done with a pencil. It's just sort of finer markings. And it can be heavier in the nape, but not in the way that not as much as the California gull. So when you see your adult ring-billed gulls, you can check them out and compare that. And then the Heermann's gull, again, pretty much stands apart. Not too hard to identify that one. So I'm going to go on now and talk about the other bear parts, their legs. And again, these are the same 4 photos, but I've zoomed in on the legs and feet. And there is some variation from bird to bird, even among the adults of the same species. You'll see some that have legs of one color and some with legs of another color, but these are sort of representative colors that you commonly see. So the Western gull, you know, very pink legs. I find these colors are easier to fix in my head if I think of them in terms of human skin tones. Like, we're used to looking at people's faces, right, and assessing their skin tone. So I think, okay, here's a light-skinned person who maybe has a little bit of a sunburn. That's how I think of the Western gulls, kind of shade of pink. California gull, that is a person who's not healthy. I mean, this is a healthy California gull, but for a person, that would be like, I'd be thinking this person is a zombie or is extremely seasick. They'll have bluish, especially above the, you know, we call it the knee sometimes, but it's really the ankle, if you think about the bird skeleton. But above this little knobby part here, you'll see bluish on the upper part of the leg sometimes in California gulls, and that's a pretty typical look for them to have. Ring-billed gull, pretty yellowish feet, not always this yellow. And, you know, as I said, there's a lot of individual variation, but if you see yellow legs like that, it's a good clue that you might be looking at a ring-billed gull. And again, the Heermann's very dark, right? There's no other gull around here has legs that are black like that. So that's a good indication. And then zooming out again. So put all that together and you're good to go, right? Again, if all the gulls were adults and they all look just like these adults, our life would be very simple. But it is not that simple. So let's talk about some of the other plumages. And again, I'm going really fast, which, you know, if I'm going too fast or you have questions, just jump in. You know, I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information. So here is, these are all Western gulls, and I've arranged these in order of age. Now, there is a lot of variety as these gulls go through their various plumages. So these are just, you know, 4 snapshots of 4 different Western gulls at these points in their lives. But that's not to say you can just match these pictures exactly to the birds you see out there in the field. But this up in the upper left-hand corner is a young gull, a first-year gull, relatively dark. But you'll notice that structure-wise, they all kind of have that same body shape, same heavy bill with the swelling. The bill starts off pretty much completely dark and then gets a fleshy base. As the bird ages, it gets more and more of that sort of flesh colored and less of that black. Pinkish legs, see, we've all got the pink legs. The mantle colors, this is something that Mark Holmgren, a local birder, clued me into when I was first working on trying to make more sense of gulls. You don't have to wait for the adult plumage to get clues about what color the mantle is going to be. So as this is maybe a second-year gull here. You can see it starts to get that characteristic darker mantle shade coming in, even though it has a lot of the rest of its feathers still have a ways to go to get to that adult appearance. And even more so down here in a bird that's a little bit further along. See, it's really got a lot of its mantle and its greater coverts here, that sort of final shade. So this kind of shows you the basic progression for a Western gull. So these are typical appearances. And again, when we go out there on Saturday, we'll probably see a bunch of Western gulls. I pretty much guarantee you none of them will look exactly like these four birds. They're all going to look their own way. They're going to put these parts together in different mixings, and that's why gulls are so much fun. That's why you can just sit there and study them for hours, because they're all different. All right, let's move on to the California gull. So again, I've got a young California gull in the upper left, and then a slightly older one here, and a still yet older one in the lower left, and then that same adult photo we looked at before in the lower right. And again, you can see they kind of have that same shape, those longer wings. California gulls migrate long distances, and they have longer wings to help with that migration, and it gives them this characteristic kind of long tapered look with a long primary extension, long wing extension coming off the back of the bird. That beak shape, again, is consistent, kind of long and parallel sided. And in the subadult birds, the various immature plumages, the beak starts off all dark, but it pretty quickly gets this kind of dipped in ink look. So it's kind of like the immature Western gull we're looking at, where it's flesh colored or at least lighter colored at the base and then dark at the tip. But with the California gull, it's really distinctive. Like there's a pretty sharp cutoff. It's got this very black tip and then a very light base of the bill. So when you see that bill pattern, you should be checking for signs of California gull. Right? And again, like on this bird down here, you can see it's got that bill pattern. It's got the mullet kind of going on with the heavy smudging at the base of the neck. You can see the mantle shade coming in, and you can see that those gray feathers are lighter than they would be for a Western gull. Right? You see the leg color, not quite as pink as a Western gull, a little bit of that bluish going on maybe. I don't know. As I said, there's variation. Like if you look at this first year California gull, its legs look kind of pink almost. I mean, not as pink as a Western gull, but certainly not green or blue. But this is what color they are. They can be, right? There's a lot of variation. All right, let's move on to the ring-billed gull. Kind of a snazzy looking bird. That thing about the white eye or the very light iris, you notice that it only gets that when it's a full-on adult, right? Through all these immature phases, it still has a dark eye. So you don't want to get led astray by that. And in general, going back to that patience strategy, don't try to identify a gull from just one thing. I mean, you should look at the eye color, but you should look at everything else too. And you should put all those pieces of evidence into the scale and weigh them all before you decide what you want to go with as your ID. Because a lot of times an individual bird will have one or two characteristics that seem kind of wrong for what it actually is. But if you look at 7 or 8 things and all the other 5 or 6 things are all pointing in one direction, it's probably that. So the again, the beak I find to be really helpful for the ring-billed gull. It's got this relatively, compared to the California gull, at least a relatively short beak, relatively thin, not much of a gonidial swelling at all. And they have this sort of interesting pattern, a pretty strongly patterned look in their juvenile plumages, which again, I'm not going to talk about in too much detail. And the sort of, again, the more distinct flecking on the head. This one's a little smudgy, but it's the way it goes. These little fine smudges with a pencil rather than those big thick smudges with a crayon. Okay, and what else? Human skull. Yeah, which again, pretty straightforward. You can see it doesn't really have the reddish beak when it's really young. It takes it a few years to start getting that. It's kind of orange and then it gets redder. And then actually in this case, I put 2 adults at the bottom just so I could show off its snazzy breeding plumage. So this is that winter plumage adult we were looking at before, that non-breeding plumage. But this time of year, coming into February and March, you'll start to see more and more of the adult gulls looking like this. And I just think it's a very attractive bird. And again, pretty hard to mistake for anything else. Okay. Oh, and I did want to talk about this. So in the previous gull talks, I never really talked about gulls in flight because in all honesty, it is something that I have been afraid of for a long time. I have tended not to try to identify gulls in flight because I figure, oh my gosh, I don't have time. I can't sit there and study them patiently. I can't tick off all the characteristics. But it turns out, if you pay attention to them, as I've started to do more of recently, you can distinguish them in flight. So put labels. So this on the left is a Western gull. And from beneath, you can see those really relatively dark wings, those flight feathers, to go with its very dark mantle shade on top. It has a very extensive dark area on the underwing. And these, of course, are all adults. I'm not going to bother trying to talk about the immature gulls in flight, but you can do the same sort of exercise with them. You can go study them at the beach, figure out what they are when they're standing, and then watch them when they fly. California gull, you see, has pretty extensive black tips on the wings, but then the rest of the flight feathers, the underside of the inner primaries and the secondaries is pretty white. So it doesn't have that look that the Western has. And then ring-billed gull is even lighter. When again, if you can see the top, you can see that its mantle is a very light mantle. And its black tips on the underside are smaller still, even than the California. So it's subtle, but if you study it, you start really looking at those, which part of that wingtip is black and which part is white, or at least light gray. You can see differences as you focus in on them. And if it's close enough, or you get a photo that you can zoom in on, you can see that the beak pattern and the eye pattern and the smudging on the neck. These are all helpful things. All right, so how do we feel about our big 4? We feel confident we can identify our big 4? It's an ongoing process. It's I get tripped up by gulls every time I go look at them. I have birds that I'm like, yeah, I really don't know what I'm looking at there. And as Suzanne was pointing out, when you throw in hybridization, there are some birds that it's impossible. They're 55% this bird and 45% this other bird. And yeah, good luck trying to assign that to a species. All right, but let's talk about 4 more species. So we've got our big 4 as a basis of comparison. And I'm going to go pretty quickly through these. So here are 4 more birds we might get. And first is the glaucous-winged gull that Suzanne was asking about again. So here is sort of your classic first-year glaucous-winged gull. And a lot of the glaucous-winged gulls that we see around here are, in fact, this color. We're a little bit outside their normal range. So for us to see them, it needs to be a bird that's kind of gone a little bit off course. And a lot of times that's a first-year bird because they don't know where they're supposed to go and they end up down here. But you can see it's pretty similar to a Western gull in terms of its overall structure. It has an all-dark beak. It has this pretty uniform light gray coloration with not too much of a patterning going on. You know, you're pretty, you know, pretty much the same shade throughout. And in particular, the wingtips are pretty much the same shade, you know, whereas in most other gulls, even immature ones, you're going to see those wingtips are going to be significantly darker than the rest of the wing. And with the glaucous winged, they're pretty similar. And here is an adult where again, these whoops, I didn't mean to do that. These primaries, the dark part of the wing that extends out past the tail are the folded primary feathers, the outermost primaries of the wing. And in the glaucous winged, you know, where almost all other sort of white-headed gulls we have around here, those would be black. And in the glaucous winged, it's a gray that's closer to the mantle shade. All right, so that is the glaucous winged gull. Another big one is the herring gull. And this is that bird that I was pointing out earlier in that comparison slide in the beginning of the talk. You know, again, it's a bird I'm not that familiar with, so I don't want to talk. I don't want to get out over my skis and sound more authoritative about herring gulls. I've only seen a few herring gulls, so I think I need to spend time where they are more common before I can really be particularly useful in describing them. But in the immature bird, you know, it's got this big chunky body, relatively long wings, you know, not really the right structure for a Western gull. And the beak is a little thinner than a Western gull's would be, kind of this long hooked beak that's not quite as swollen at the tip as a Western gull would be. And then this strong patterning, this sort of regular checkerboard effect on the mantle and the coverts is a thing you see in herring gulls. And in the adult, it kind of, you know, it has a white eye like a ring-billed gull. It has a very light mantle, also kind of like a ring-billed gull. So in that respect, it's kind of like a very big version of a ring-billed gull. But again, it's got its own characteristic beak that's very different from a ring-billed gull. This is your adult herring gull.
And it also looks like it has pink feet too, instead of like a herring gull. I mean, a ring-billed gull.
Yeah. I mean, again, you should look at everything when you're ticking these off. But and you know, we get a few adult herring gulls in Santa Barbara County that you can find every year if you look for them. This one was out at Lake Cachuma. There seems to be a few of them at Lake Cachuma every year. I'm not sure why they like it there, but if you want to find a herring gull, you can go look for them there. All right, here is another gull. This one's pretty small. If it were next
The
to
mean gull, right?
yes, but it's actually had a name change. So this used to be known as the mew gull, but nowadays it is called the short-billed gull. They did a lumping, I think is what they did. They basically, there's a bird called a common gull now that's a European species. Or maybe it was a split, like it used to be. I'm confused. All I know is that locally we used to have mew gulls, and now what we have is called short-billed gulls. And it's part of this whole splitting or lumping or something they did to rearrange them with respect to the European version of it, which is now called the common gull. So maybe it was a split. Maybe they were all mews before, and now they are common and short-billed. Not sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I don't think I clarified much there, except I clarified that I shouldn't try and talk about gulls after going birding all day for too long, because I start not making sense. But this bird, if you see it, and we've had a few on the beaches. I haven't seen any in the last week or two, but there have been some down at Carp State Beach. It's relatively small. It's relatively elongated. So it's got, you know, sort of like that stretched out teardrop shape, like a California gull, only more so. It's even more stretched out. And a very small beak, right? So the short-billed name is apt. It's you know, compared to even a ring-billed gull, this is a smaller bill. And if you know, are focusing in on that bill structure the way you should be, these short-billed gulls will jump out at you right away because their beaks are so tiny.
Yeah, it just looks like a smaller version of a California gull, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. Although, leg color is different. And
Yeah.
again, that bill pattern is different. Doesn't
Yeah.
have any dark markings on the bill. It's an unmarked bill in the adult. Has a pretty wide, this white area, the tertials. So this big white part here is pretty large on the short-billed gull. So that's something you can look for in the adults. I mean, again, they're pretty distinctive if you're going by the bill structure. And one more I wanted to show is this one. So this is a Bonaparte skull. And I apologize for the really bad flight photo there. That's the best photo I happen to have of a Bonaparte skull in flight. And it kind of shows you the immature birds have this really interesting pattern on the upper wing that's distinctive. The adult birds, dark beak, which is very unique looking, and this dark ear patch in their non-breeding plumage. In their breeding plumage, they have a whole black head, which you occasionally see around here, I think. But most of the birds we see are this non-breeding plumage. And I threw this picture down here, so you can just see how small they are. This is the Bonaparte gull in the foreground, and these are two California gulls. So again, if you see them together on the beach, you know right away, this is something different because it's tiny. It's a tiny little bird. And I think that is everything. We've made it. We've made it through the Gull Refresher. Congratulations, everyone. I will stop sharing my screen. Again, if we had more, if we had a special guest, I would now be peppering the special guest with questions, but we don't have one, so you have to be the special guest and pepper me with your questions. I'll look and see what's been said in the chat. Pinkish legs important for any age Western gull, asks Linda. Yeah, pretty much. Although again, there's variations. How are the populations of these gulls doing? Do some outnumber others? Yes, they definitely do. I can't speak authoritatively to gull numbers everywhere, but here on Carpinteria's beaches, this time of year, we've got a fair number of Western gulls, a lot of California gulls, a fair number of ring-billed gulls. Just in the last week, I've noticed, if you go around the mouth of Carpinteria Creek, there seems to be a whole group of like 7 or 8 ring-billed gulls walking around. And that's something I didn't talk about. So behaviorally, they're distinctive too. The ring-billed gulls, they like to walk. It's like they're trying to get their steps in or something. Like when you see them, they're always walking along the beach. That's like their sort of foraging strategy. And the other gulls walk on the beach too. But I mean, the ring-billed gulls seem like they're always walking, like they're late for an appointment somewhere. They're just kind of cruising up and down the beach. Let's see, a question from Michelle. And we see all these on Carp Beach and surrounding area. Yes, all of these are gulls we can see on Carpinteria's beaches. Again, we've got a good shot at those big four. Although the last time I was down the beach a few days ago, I didn't see any Heermann gulls. But a few weeks before that, I saw, hundreds of them. So they're birds, they move around, you have to go see what's there. That's the fun of bird watching. For those other four, yeah, there was a glaucous-winged gull down there, a first-year bird, the last time I was down at the beach. So that's a possibility. I haven't seen a herring gull at Carp Beach in a while, but I'm not there every day, so there could well have been one there. I haven't seen a Bonaparte's in a while. And short-billed, yeah, there were some short-billed that were hanging out there a few months ago, but haven't seen them lately. So I don't know, we'll have to go see. Do gulls migrate? Yes, some migrate long distances. So the California gull and the ring-billed gull, for example, they really cover some ground. If you look at the range maps, they go into the interior part of the country in the breeding season, and they cover large amounts of it. And then in the winter, they retreat to the coasts, and that's why we have so many California gulls right now. Like during the breeding season, we have a few California gulls, but not as many as we do right now. And then there's this big migration that happens where we get lots of California gulls coming in, and we'll get lots of California gulls leaving. Western gulls, less so. Again, I don't know details, but they don't cover as much distance normally. Heermann's gulls are kind of interesting. They do this sort of reverse migration. They breed to the south in Mexico, and then in the non-breeding time, they disperse north into California. So, we get a lot more of them. We get more of them like in the, winter time, but then they sort of have this reverse migration of what we normally think of birds doing. Was there a laughing gull here some years ago? Yes, we have had laughing gulls here. And, that's one of the great joys of gull watching is you'll go down to the beach. I went down to Carp State Beach and I was just walking around, walking to the creek and back from Linden, and like, oh my gosh, there's a completely different gull sitting there with all the other gulls, and it was a laughing gull. And we've had a few laughing gulls, we've had a few Franklin's gulls. What other unusual gulls have we had? Those are the ones I think that, of the ones that are very unlikely to show up, those are the most likely of those to appear, but there could be, anything on any given day. There was a glaucous gull, not in Carpinteria, but up at the other end of the county last year, I think. There was a lesser black-backed gull that hung out at Ocean Beach Park out near Lompoc, and actually in Lompoc too. The gull was moving back and forth several winters in a row. I don't know if it's there this winter. So yeah, there's some wacky gulls out there. There's a gull called a slaty-backed gull that's got a very dark mantle, and it's I think it's an Asian species. It's not supposed to be in North America at all, but a few of them have been showing up, and there's one down in Los Angeles County right now, and there's one up in the Bay Area. So, they're coming through. There's a chance of us getting one of those. So if you see a big, dark mantled gull that looks really wrong for a Western gull, take a close look at it, get a photo if you can. Maybe you've got a slaty-backed gull. What is the diet of gulls? You guys have great questions. Gulls like Doritos. I can attest to that from personal experience. They like sandwiches. They're omnivores. They take advantage of lots of things, not just people food, but their ability to take advantage of human food is, I think, part of their doing so well. When a lot of other birds are suffering from human alterations to the environment, some gull species at least have done spectacularly well with humans around. If you want to see a lot of gulls, go to a dump, go to an open air dump somewhere, and there'll be a flock of thousands of gulls hanging out, picking through the trash. They eat, marine life. They scavenge along the beaches. They are predatory. They will raid nests of other birds. When the snowy plovers nested on the beach in Carpinteria last summer for the first time in 60 years, it was very exciting. Those of us who were down there watching those birds, every time a Western gull, started wandering over to where the chicks were or where the nest was, it was very nerve-wracking, because nest predation is a way that gulls can impact snowy plover reproductive success. But in this case, the gulls left the plovers alone, which was good to see. I don't want to take sides, they're all part of nature's grand plan, but I was happy that those snowy plovers made it successfully to adulthood. Okay, so I think that's probably a good place for us to stop. Did you have a question, Brody?
One more question.
Yeah.
When is the outing on Saturday?
I'm planning for us to meet at 8 o'clock in the morning. So Saturday morning at 8 o'clock at the south end of Linden. And I was kind of vague about where we'll actually go. A lot of times there are gulls right there, and we can just check out the gulls right there. Sometimes
so they look around.
Yeah, we'll just look around. We'll,
okay.
Chances are good we'll find some gulls somewhere. That's a good spot. Also, the mouth of Carpinteria Creek is often a good spot. The gulls like to go and take a bath in the creek and hang out there. So if we're having a hard time finding gulls at the end of Linden, maybe we'll go down to the creek and see what's down there.
Okay. Thank you.
John?
Yeah, what was that?
Hey, John, this is Steve here.
Hey, Steve.
Your family.
My brother-in-law, Steve, everyone. Say hello to Steve.
Yeah. Yes, I'm going to seed another question. So would it be possible for you to try to explain further how to get a sense of the wing length? I think you're talking about when the wings are folded up, when the bird is standing there.
Yeah, I can go back
to see that difference. Yeah.
Let me reshare for a second. If I can do this. Oh, you know what I didn't do? Okay, this is something fun. We have a few. Are you guys okay if I stretch the meeting just a little bit? Because there was something I totally forgot to do that I was going to do while we were talking.
Yeah.
Let me
Okay.
get this window. So first, let me talk about the wings. So what you kind of are looking at is you're looking at the how far the wing sticks out past the tertials, which is the sort of covering feathers right here,
Okay.
and how far the tips stick out past the tail, which is right there.
Okay.
And you know, it's very handy that gulls are pretty oblivious to people. You know, you can get pretty close and just kind of, you know, sit down with your binoculars 20 feet away and really study them in detail. So that can be helpful to kind of see, you know, like how many primary feathers can you count sticking out past it? Like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 primaries. You know, if we look at like, okay, in this herring gull, it has, you know, less of a primary extension, right? It's not sticking out as far past the end of the tail.
Yep.
You know, glaucous wing, kind of same thing. You know, it's not as elongated. So the other thing I was going to do that I totally forgot to do is I wanted to what I wanted to do. I wanted to play the sounds that they make. So this is something, you know, I'm very focused on bird sounds, and it's, you know, I do a lot of birding by ear, but I've always ignored the gull sounds, you know, maybe because they're just so confusing visually, and, you know, you're not always hearing them, or I don't know. But then I realized when I started listening to recordings of them that I actually knew them. Like it evokes memories of places I've been. Like here is, this is a recording from Zeno Canto by David Vanderplum of Western gull vocalizations. Let's see if this works. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear that. Those are Western gulls. And to me, that is like being at the marina. You know, I grew up sailing with Meliz and Steve and other people in my family. We did a lot of sailing when I was younger. That's what that reminds me of, is being at the harbor, you know, hearing the Western gulls. Here is a recording of California gull made by Ian Cruikshank. And to me, what that evokes is that's what I hear when we're at like Mono Lake or Crowley Lake with a lot of the, you know, when you go to the Eastern Sierra and there's a lot of California gulls there in the summertime, in the breeding season, you know, they breed around there. So it was interesting to me that I knew those vocalizations, even though I'd ignored them a lot. Here's Ring-billed gull. This again is by Ian Cruikshank. And then here's Heerman's gull. This is a recording by Brian Henderson. A wild, wild sound. Okay, anyway, I wanted to share those sounds. And I should have adjusted the screen to show the different species as I was playing their sounds, but, you know, I'm just happy I got to the end of the meeting after, again, birding all day, you know, and probably I've been making no sense for at least the last 15 minutes, but I appreciate you sticking with me and not, you know, embarrassing me by pointing it out when I say things that make no sense.
You've made enough sense.
Thank you, Brody. That's a good bar to try and reach. Yeah, you don't have to make all the sense, just make sufficient sense.
And on the sounds, it's something I'm going to have to practice, except for the earmans, because that one, they said, out, 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 out. I love that.
Yeah, and again,
They
we've had
sound
some,
like seals.
Yes.
yeah, we've had some big flocks of Heerman's gulls, and I realized when I was listening to these recordings, like, oh yeah, I've heard them doing that down at the beach. It's like really loud when there's a lot of them there.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone. Well, thank you again, and
Thank
hope to
you.
see some of you on Saturday. And hope you participate in the great backyard bird count. I mean, if you go with us on Saturday, you will be participating because we'll put in our eBird list for that day. And think about the little big day in April. Maybe, you know, form a team, go out there and competitively count birds in Carpinteria. All right, bye everyone.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank
Thank you.
you.